I think that we are live. I think that
Amazing.
we're live. It's wonderful. So, a big giant hello to Ammi-Joan Paquette. And I know that you go by the name of Ammi-Joan, but people call you Joan. So may I call you Joan?
You may call me Joan.
Does anybody call you Amy?
Um, People who don't know me yet, because it's the obvious thing to call me because that is the first name. So when somebody calls me, or like the bank, or the library, that kind of thing. If you call me Amy, totally fine, but I will know that you're not in the know.
And sometimes you call yourself Joe.
Yes, that is my alter ego when I am trying to sneak around as a adult author or author writing for
I think
adults.
to sneak around as an adult.
Exactly. Well, that seems like a bit of a stretch, but we do what we
Yeah, now
can.
my theory, of course, is that we people who deal in children's books are children at heart. But we'll get to that. And I haven't even introduced you. You are a spectacular author and a senior agent at Vitas, and it's such a wonderful pleasure to have you. And we talked in Bologna at the Bologna Children's Fair. And it was very noisy, but still we managed to connect. And here we are, only, oh, I don't know, 5 months later, and
5 months,
we're
yeah.
all, we're all, we're
Time
already,
flies.
yeah, and so do we. And we're already having an interview. And so, what would you like to talk about first? Let's talk about your writing career. You've written over 20 children's books and at least one adult book with a very, very interesting name that we might talk about, even though it's a children's program. And while we're talking about children's programs, I will introduce myself because I've forgotten to do that with all of the excitement and your multiplicity of names. So I'm Mel Rosenberg, and I'm the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. And Joan, welcome to the show. So we're
Yeah.
celebrating a brand new board book that just came out last month, and it's called My Mouth Says. It's a Penguin imprint. Show it to everybody and brag about it and talk about it.
Yes, it's part of a series of which the first is My Hands Can. The second would be Here If I Had It, and it's called My Feet Go, but I couldn't.
Because it just walked away. That's why.
They go. It goes everywhere. You turn around, it's gone. And My Mouth Says just came out last month. And the awesome thing is it got a starred review by School Library Journal, which is so delightful. When you get to the later books in a series, you're happy to know that people are discovering them. And so it's, all the more special to get that. And then actually the second absent book, the My Feet Go, is a Dolly just was picked for a Dolly Parton Imagination Library pick too. So it's fun to see. These are my first board books, so it's fun to see them finding their readers and yeah, just trying something new.
Mhm. I know agents who say that board books are not being published these days, and there you go and publish three board books.
It's yeah, it they can be tough, as an agent also. And but they're I think editors, it just is a matter of, the right thing at the right time, which is like most things that get published is, a combination of obviously talent and persistence, but also luck in getting, you have to do your excellent work, but then you also have to be lucky to be in the right place at the right time. So in this case, I had the hands book, and the editor that my agent submitted it to said, "Would Joan consider making this a series?" I mean, what is an author gonna say? Heck yes. So that's how that came.
You're represented by another awesome agent, Erin Murphy.
Yes, correct.
And we'll get to that. Like, how does an agent having an agent work? Do agents have agents who have agents? And it's intriguing to me.
Self-perpetuating cycle. No, I was an author first before I became an agent. So Aaron took me on as a client. I then underwent some changes in my work life, such that I ended up becoming an agent at her agency. So then we were agent client, but also colleagues, but also, yeah, so it was kind of all these layers. I do know that I think there are some agents who are their own agent, but for the most part, I feel like most people like to have a little bit of a separation in there because it just, for the same, slightly different reason that an author would have an agent. Of course, technically, I could do my own submitting, but it feels cleaner to have someone else handle that. I can concentrate on having a creative relationship with my editor. I also feel like it makes me feel more comfortable in terms of my own clients, that there wouldn't be a perception of, am I prioritizing my submissions over their submissions? I focus on them, my agent focuses on me, everybody's happy.
No, but I mean, I can see funny conversations where you say, where your agent says to you, well, board books aren't going, and you say, I just sold.
I'm like, well,
Anyway,
here's a
yeah.
suggestion that you could send. Yeah, I'm always sending her suggestions, but hopefully
Okay,
she doesn't mind.
Joan, let's get back to the book, to your new book. Open it up, talk about the illustrations, and read
This
us
is
a bit of it,
It
because
is a wonderful illustrator called Sabrina Kadia, and she is just it's such a vibrant, kind of images that are just bursting with life. And one thing that we have done across this whole series is to have a real kind of inclusivity in there. And the reviews have also commented on it. But there's in each one different characters that have challenges, with the feet. There was a person with a prosthetic limb, with the hands. There's speaking in sign language. So it just, trying to just bring in all different abilities and facets of ways that readers are going to approach life or their world. So
I'm in awe and in jealousiness. You have a wonderful ability to speak to very young children in rhyme, in meter. Read a bit for the listeners and viewers, if you
okay.
will.
This is my mouth, open to see lips and tongues and gums and teeth. Mouths can guzzle, gnaw, and chew. Mouths can nibble, tasty food. Blow a bubble, suck on a straw, lick an ice cream. Mouths do it all. What we want, our heart knows. What we feel, our mouth shows. It's a little
It's
sample.
beautiful. And it also illustrates one of my, I have these pet theories and pet peeves. We teach authors that the rhyme has to be perfect and the meter has to be perfect. And yet, when it isn't 100% perfect, it's 97% perfect. The book is actually more adorable. And that's what I find.
Yeah, it is really kind of, it's such a balance. You want it to be, you want it to kind of bounce, kind of energy to where it reads, logically and smoothly. I did find that you might be referring like to near rhymes versus like a precise rhyme.
Well, you just recited a near rhyme, and
Right.
I find it more charming and engaging than a
Mhm.
perfect rhyme. That's
Yeah, and I think one reason for that is it allows for a freshness of, language, and it can take things because ultimately there's a fairly finite number of precisely rhyming words, and especially when you have to cover very specific material. I can only talk about things that mouths are going to do, and there's not that many things that they do. So if you're rhyming with box and you do socks, well, yes, okay, or rocks. But sometimes when you have a slightly sideways that evokes the same sound but is not too precise, you can bring in an image that's a little more unexpected. And I think that may account for that because it just kind of it's like you still hear the rhyme, echo, but it gives a bit of a bit of a
it gives a bounce.
yeah.
The same thing when the meter is not 100% perfect. It's just kind of it
It
throws you off.
varies it a little bit
Yeah,
too
yeah.
pat. Then you start to be like, doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. You want to kind of, yeah, you want to kind of move a little.
A little bump.
Mm.
So it's in adorable. I've gone over the three books. They're all adorable and charming. And now I want you to talk about your own charming personality and how you grew up and what you were like as a kid. I know that you were a voracious reader. I know that you climb mountains. Tell us about your very young Joan or Aminess.
Not a whole lot of mountain climbing when I was very young. We moved around a lot. I was definitely kind of a timid, was I? I don't know, combination of timid and, obstinate. But very sort of imagination driven childhood. I have a sister who's 2 years younger. We used to do a lot of make believe. We made paper dolls that we drew on paper. We invented games of like riding imaginary horses and, not didn't have a lot growing up, so we kind of had to make our own
Where,
games.
where, where did you grow up and why did you move around all the
Oh
time?
gosh, that's too long of a story, but mostly in Europe. I was, my parents were
Yes.
separated, so between Italy and France,
Ah,
my childhood. So
your parents were separated
yes, divorced, but yes. Yeah, so
between
I was
Italy and
born,
France?
yeah, I was born in North America, but then we moved to Europe.
Because it says que tu parles plusieurs langues.
Ben oui, je parle français et
Ah,
parlo anche italiano.
amazing. And Japanese. Hajime mashite.
はい。日本語話します。
Okay, so I'm just going to say domo arigato gozaimasu, and we'll move on because
どういたしまして。
you've exhausted all my Japanese. So you grew up everywhere, and now to my theory. I think that those of us who write for very young kids, and you have a double indemnity here because you not only write for young kids, but you also are an agent for people who write for young kids.
Mhm.
So do you find yourself stuck at a certain young age?
Good question. I feel like when I have two daughters who are older, I feel like my loose kind of, mental categorization is that my sense of was when I was writing picture books, I was kind of channeling my kids or, things that experiences that happened to them, possibly because I started writing younger books when my kids were younger. And when I was writing more middle grade, it was more the child me. So I feel like 12 is the age that I kind of gravitate toward that feels like you know, feels like that kind of resonance, like you said. Um, then now having made a bit of a shift to also writing more for adults, it's been interesting to, I always used to feel like I'm not an adult. How can I possibly write for them? That whole kind of jam. And then, just going through some different life stuff in the last few years. Part of my way of processing that was with starting to just write these stories for adults, for myself, really. And that ended up becoming a book. They were collected into a book. And that also felt a very authentic, kind of true kind of inner reflection. So I don't know. I think maybe being an author is the ability to put yourself into places in time. And maybe you work with a certain age while you're kind of plumbing it and sort of trying to get to the bottom of it. And then, maybe the psyche kind of moves around. Maybe, I don't know. So I think I have always been a very varied kind of creator. I work with a lot of authors and illustrators who have a
Well,
similar
that was
approach.
that was my next question. Do you
Yeah.
find that your clients, you have about 50 clients,
Hmm.
and almost all of them are children's book authors. Are
Hmm.
they childish?
I mean, yes and no. They are not a monolith, each one is individual. I think there's some that wear their, youthfulness a little more on their sleeve than others. I feel like some of my folks that I work with who are who present as the most serious or, taciturn, have some of the liveliest written voice. So I don't think there's necessarily a correlation between, what you write and how you sort of evoke. But
Go
I think,
ahead. Go ahead. Spoil my theories. Go ahead.
I mean,
No, it's fine. I mean, that that's why we're here, Joan. So you grew up in a difficult situation, wandering in between countries, and I'm not a psychologist. Uh, uh, what happened to you that drew you towards writing, or was this something that happened after college, or what?
That's a good question. I mean, I think to some extent I've always written. Again, I know in my, early teen years, again with my sister, we would fold paper into books and like, hand write and hand draw the covers, and also in the series, make these whole lists. So certainly I was writing way back. But actually what got me started into sort of seriously thinking about writing for publication was my mom. Um, uh, and got sick and when I was you know like a lot of years ago, and she at one point she got lung cancer, and she was telling me shortly before she passed away that she said, I always wanted to write a book. I always wanted to publish a book. That was a dream of mine, and I hadn't known that about her, but when she said that, it just, I don't know, something about it made me think. I hadn't really thought about specifically getting published. I would just write stories or write for myself or whatever. So at first I started writing about her, her sickness or whatever, and obviously that wasn't going anywhere. But then I started thinking about my kids, and I was like, okay, I could write stories based on, for or about or inspired by. And that was, I think, kind of when I started. And then, it just kind of sparked. And from one thing to another, one type of story to another, it just, was a way to have a voice, I think, during a time when I didn't have a lot of voice.
First of all, I'm very sorry about your mom. And you had two young kids at the time.
Mhm.
What were you doing for a living before, or what did you study at college? What was your background before you jumped into this?
At the time, I wasn't working. I was, doing freelance, taking care of the kids when they were little. So then, as they started going to school, then I started working for a educational software. You know, it was pre-apps, so program, whatever. And then from there, when that startup got bought and laid off, then I segued into agenting. So
But
yeah,
you
so
were,
at that time, yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, but you were writing first, and then you were.
Yes.
I read your biography. So how did you? Because as you know, the chance of finding an agent is one in 1,000, one in 2,000, one in 3,000. Having a traditional publishing career is a miracle, and you know that. Are you going to deny it?
I cannot say. I'm not a statistics gal, so I will leave you with this theory. I will not disprove it for you. I don't know.
Okay, okay. We can do the stats later, but it's very hard to break in.
Yes. And I think
How,
especially for now, much more, I think, I don't know if it's ever increasing odds, but certainly from 20 plus years ago, there just was a lot less volume. And I think the internet has a wonderful thing, but it's also the availability and the ubiquity of information means that a lot of very talented creators have access to information. And so a lot more people are querying agents, and there's still, probably a comparable amount of book publishers. Agents volume goes up and down, but ultimately there's a certain pool, and because of people have more access. Before it was somebody who knew somebody, or who even knew what an agent was, and the few publishers.
Joan, did you know? So did you know what was your story? We'll come back to the statistics in a minute. What was your mini miracle?
um Well, I started writing, and I wrote a bunch of different stuff. I was querying agents. I was going through my papers the other day, and I found some of these old paper rejections from some of these agents and editors who are now my colleagues, which is very hilarious.
You
I'm like,
son of
oh,
a.
I see you rejecting me. But yeah, tons of rejections.
Listen,
Just
you probably rejected me. Come on.
I would never.
Ah,
But I would go to a lot of conferences. I was in the Boston area at the time, and they had the New England conference every year. I would go to the different surrounding states. They had one, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and I would always sit in on the editors' sessions, and they would talk about what they wanted, and I would take notes. And I was, even then writing a lot of different things. I had funny picture books, bedtime picture books, chapter book. I don't know if I'd started doing middle
but
grade.
how did you know? How did you find out about critique groups at CBWI? What's the
I don't
how
remember
to
how I
okay?
found out. I
But
had
you
I
were
had
you,
critique groups.
you were doing all the right stuff.
I was, going to the conferences, having critique partners, and then sending stuff out. And so when I would go to these editors' sessions, I would take notes, and then I would send my things to the ones because then they'll open for submissions being in the conference. So when I did, so I forget precise. So Erin was one of the agents that I had queried. She rejected me at least once, possibly twice. And then I was like, here's something else. I forget the context exactly, but I remember we had a phone call and she was like, so you have a lot of things. You're talented and these are great. And some of them are fantastic. And other ones I feel like maybe don't feel as strong to me. So, if we're gonna work together, like it has to, I would hope, would it be okay if we don't necessarily submit everything because I feel like some of them are stronger than others. And I was like, yes, yes, whatever you say, I'm gonna be like, heck yes. There's no negative answer to this question. And so yeah, so then we started working together. And then subsequently to that, I started working as an agent with her on my client's work. And then at the time, she sent out an email to all of her editor connections saying, please welcome my new co-agent at my agency. I was the first one to join on her agency, aside from just being her. And all these editors apparently wrote her back and they were like, we know Joan, we love Joan. And I was like, well, that's nice that, from me sending stuff their way, I wasn't like, you know, antagonize them. Apparently they liked me enough to be happy for me as an agent.
You,
So
you, you must have been very, very charming, and when they rejected you, they did it with aplomb, finesse, and love.
certainly.
So then you have these dual careers running side by side.
Mhm.
Um, and so I assume you started with just a few clients, and now you have such a big list. I had a look at it and was overjoyed to find that Patsy Miller is one of your authors. A big
Yes.
shout out to Pat. We love you. Uh, and now you're so busy that you're really not taking on. You're not open to general queries, and you're full.
I mean, technically, I've never been open to queries because Erin had that. Her personal policy was she only took queries by referral or, you know, conferences that she had presented at. So obviously, I could make up my own rules, but I thought, you know what, that seems like a good plan because I know that if you're open to queries, it's just such a high volume. It's almost a full-time job just to keep up with it.
Well, hold on. Let's do this fast. So the agents that I have interviewed who
Mhm.
are open to queries, when they open, they will get at least 1,000 submissions a month,
That
which
is a lot.
is, yeah, 20 or 30 submissions a day, between five
I
and
would
12,000 a
die.
year. And they
Yeah.
will take on, yeah, maybe four new clients a year.
Hmm.
So it's 1 in 3,000. So those are
That's
the
that's
odds.
where you're on. Yeah, that's good. That's steep odds. Yeah. And I mean so I don't have nearly that volume. But certainly at the beginning when you have more openings on your list, like there's just more scope to take on. And especially in the picture book space, picture book authors, that's especially I always tell people who are looking for an agent as a picture book author, your best strategy for, the best chance of success is if you can find an agent who is very new, but at an established agency. Because if you're going with a brand new agent starting their own agency without then that's a risk. They may be very talented and connected, but they also may not. So if you get an established agency, then they have the support, they have the training, they have, you're not going to get accidentally stuck with with some kind of a bad situation. But if you have a new agent, then they've got space on their list because if I sign either an illustrator or a novelist, I sell their project, they go away for a year or two to create that work, and then they come back to me with more work. Whereas if I sell a picture book author, I sell their text, tomorrow morning they're going to have three new manuscripts in my inbox. If I signed them 10 years ago, I'm still getting, this, on-flow. And it's not, picture books are in a tough time right now. They're absolutely selling, but they're selling more slowly. And, editors are full. They also have big lists and books that they published 10 years ago. Some of them are still in print. And so you're competing against what's in the inbox, you're competing against what's on the shelf, what's in the backlist. Um, so for me, when I get new picture book authors querying me right now, for the most part, I'm like, I can't, and if you have too many, and there's that balance between, of course, you want to fall in love with something new, and this is exciting, this is a wonderful voice. But if I have too many, then I'm going to be competing against my existing people, and I don't want to do disservice to those who are already continuing to send me good work. So that's the reason why lists get full, and just general timing wise, when things get busy. Obviously, my first priority is going to be to my clients. So I'm going to, before I start catching up on my query inbox, I'm going to catch up on the submission, the client work. And I used to be pretty fast at going through it. Now I've got a big backlog because I've had a lot of life changes in the last few years. But I always feel like I don't want to read my submissions and my queries if I'm in such a busy frame of mind that I absolutely have no bandwidth and all I can do is reject it. Then I'm not, A, I can't because I'm too busy, but B, I'm just going to reject it. And that's not the results that they want anyway. Giving it a little more time means I'm slower, and it means I'm sure it's frustrating for those who are waiting. But I will be reading it when I'm conceivably like, okay, if I get excited about this, and I do, and then I'm like, okay, you've been in my inbox for quite a while. Are you still looking for an agent? And then I sign them, and then I'm busy again.
So,
But yeah,
so how
the
many
cycle.
how many authors or illustrators do you sign a year, if at all?
I think it just depends. It really just depends. But it could be half a dozen or so.
Mhm.
I'm pretty, when I'm able to, I really, I mean, I love it. I enjoy it. It's going to be a problem because I assume there is a finite end point of my capacity as a human. I have not reached it yet, but I'm sure that it's there. But it's fun, and I love discovering new talent and getting excited about a new project and connecting with talented, passionate people, and trying to make those magic things happen for them.
I think that that's a very noble and responsible answer. And I also have to say that when I started out um, 10 years ago, taking this seriously and getting rejected time after time after time, you do build up some antipathy. Is that a word, antipathy?
Hmm.
Towards these agents. Why aren't they loving your stuff?
Learn agents.
And they must be very mean people, mean-spirited ogres. Um, and but then because of the NBN interviews, I must have interviewed 20 or 30 agents, and you guys are, and then I meet you and discover um, that
Who
you
knew?
are
We're human.
kind, human beings, wonderful people who hate rejecting, who are sensitive and sometimes have a history of being an author and having been in that
Yes.
slush pile themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important to remember. How do you manage your dual citizenship? Do you have like morning hours for writing, afternoon hours for agenting?
Um, I manage it less well than I used to, as things get busier. I started with these great, aspirations. I'm like, this is gonna be perfect. It's the perfect mix, when agent life is quiet, then I can write. And when writing is quiet, I can agent, which is, great in theory. And it works for the first few years. Except after a certain point, you realize that agenting is never quiet and you're never caught up. And as long as I mean, not somebody's always going to be waiting on something from me. But like if I'm too behind, or if I feel like, folks are, my stuff in my inbox is old, and then it's hard for me to really kind of get in that creative mindset. So I have to be a certain amount of caught up in order to really kind of let myself write. Um, and um, and I think there's also just sort of a sense of oh my gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. Um, I am a morning person, so I want to whatever I'm doing that's going to be my best work is going to be first thing in the morning. So if I am going to write, I'm gonna take my laptop, go out to a coffee shop at 6 or 7 in the morning, have a latte, and I'm gonna, be in writer mode. If I want to really get caught up on my most concentrated work, I'm gonna sit at my desk and make a cup of way too strong tea. With half and half, and melt and sure, and I'm gonna just like blast on the inbox, and I'm gonna get a whole ton of work done. But those two are kind of mutually exclusive. So not that I can't write and then work, but what I'm saying is I don't write very much, is the bottom
That,
line.
that,
Um, yeah.
and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But can you like say to yourself, oh, this happens to me, but I'm not an agent, but I do other things too. But if I'm in a real writing mood,
Mm.
then I will just put everything aside and write
Yeah.
because
I do usually what I'll do, it's been a while, I confess. But I'll take a morning and I'll be like, okay, this morning is my writing morning. I'll go early. I'll write for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I'll come back home at like, 10 or 11, and then I'll resume the workday. Um, yeah, that hasn't been working very well for me lately, but I aspire to that. I aspire to that. And when I travel or when I have meetings, then it just, there's all the moving parts. But what is working for me, somewhat, is I'll go on, either I'll work on write on a weekend, or I will go to like a writing retreat with friends. We'll either for a weekend or a few days during the week. Small-ish, either just one friend or a little group of us. Um, we meet somewhere, we, get together in common spaces and individually write, and then hang out in the evening, and then go back and write more. And that really helps because it gets me in that mindset. I'm like, okay, these 3 days, I'm just going to be a writer. And it takes me a little bit to kind of switch off the email instinct. Obviously, I'm still keeping up with whatever urgent things, but and then I feel like I have to justify. I'm like, okay, I spent money to go to this Airbnb, so I better produce something. And so then there's the guilt kicking in. So a chunk of time on occasion at the moment is what's working. But also I think the other thing too, as a, creator slash, work, professional person, is always, being open to reinventing the wheel, because what worked for me 5 years ago is not working anymore. What, is working for me now maybe won't be working. So I think it's easy to get stuck in a rut of expectation. This is my pattern. This is my path. This is what, whereas, being a little more open, I bought this wonderful hourglass, this beautiful vintage hourglass. I bought it on eBay and I thought it was going to be like this. And instead it's literally like this tall. It's beautiful. It's in my other room. I think it's like about 45 minutes. We tried to count it one time, but I feel like this is, I haven't tried this yet. I keep meaning to, but like that's going to be like my writing time. Like I take the hourglass and I turn it upside down, and I'm like, as long as the sand is going down this hourglass, I'm just going to write. But it's also kind of big to carry to the coffee shop, and I feel like that might look kind of weird. So, but anyway,
I'm sure that some of the listeners will find you a virtual hourglass that will be in the corner of your laptop.
oh no, 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 I don't believe in that. I'm not down for that.
No.
That's
Okay.
none of this
Listen,
virtual
Joan, we're having too much fun. I'm going to have to call you back in half a year or so, and then
stuff.
because so many things I want to ask. But before I let you go back to your writing and your agenting and your exciting life, there is two pressing questions. The
Okay.
first pressing question is, you tell your authors and potential authors, write to your passion.
Yes.
But so very often you write to your passion in an area where nobody's interested. Now, because you are an agent and you know, at least you think you know what editors are looking for these days, what's hot, and you have an agent, the agent has an agent who also thinks that she knows what everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how are you able, given the hourglass and whatever, and your sunglasses at this retreat, um, how are you able to write about whatever you damn want to, but somewhere in Joan's little head is saying, this is not going to sell.
hmm It's a quandary. It is. And I think, I mean, maybe it's a little more visceral for me because I am immersed in that kind of market in a way that, a writer who's not an agent may not be. But I think there is some sense always of like passion versus commercial potential. Um, and I think I don't think there's any right answer because for many authors, there is a range of things that you could be writing passionately about, and you could be authentic and you could be driven by genuine, so for me, like, okay, as a creator, I'm like, okay, I have these six ideas, I could be really excited about these two. Which of these two feels most of the moment? And then you just write that to the best of your ability. But also it's not it's again it's not formulaic. You can't always pin it down. I did, hold your applause, but I did actually write this weekend. I went on Sunday and I know I sacrificed the no caffeine day to have caffeine. And but I have been having a hard time writing lately. It's just been there's so much going on in the life department, and I have several projects that I want to work on, and one in particular that I know is very commercial. And I think if I could write it, it could probably sell. And I keep being like, this is what I need to write. This is the one. And I come back to it and I just can't make it happen. Like I can't do it. And so when I went on Sunday, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna free myself from this constraint. And I pulled up this story that I had, that was just really an idea, but it really was kind of sparking inside my mind. And I'm like, if there's one thing that is probably not gonna go anywhere right now, it's a short story. Like I have some of those written, and those, it's not gonna fly off to market. I mean, maybe it will if anyone wants to buy it. That's fantastic by me. And I didn't finish it, obviously. I just did some work on it, but that was what was calling to me. And I left that session being like, you know what? I have two or three pages that I'm excited about. I know where I want to take this. And what that does, whether or not it ever sells, whether or not it becomes part of a book, is it's feeding my creative energy. It's saying, hey, remember you can write instead of just looking at this commercial thing that you can't seem to wrap your head around right now. This is something that you can produce and that lights you up, and it's something that's speaking to a truth that I want to explore in my own mind. And hopefully then I'll go from there, I mean, hopefully I will finish it and sell it, but even if not, then I go from there to something else. And maybe next week I can work on the longer thing that, you know, so I don't know. I guess you can't, it's good to be aware. So insofar as what the market is looking for. If you're writing something that is sort of patently, passe, it's a little, it's not the best use of your time, except writing is also its own enjoyment, So it's just that balance. I'm talking in circles.
Yeah, no, you're not. This has been wonderful, and I don't want to let you go. I know you have to go, but I don't want you to go. So do you know what's passe? Does Erin know what's passe? Does anybody really know what is
I
passe?
mean, there's certain things you can point to that are, most people are aware. If you're trying to sell a picture book now, it needs to be short, usually, like under 500
No,
words,
no,
or,
we're talking about. No, I don't want to get into style. I want to get into a content.
topic,
Like
content,
people will say dinosaur books are down, and then they'll sell a million dinosaur books.
then they'll
And
come back, or vampires, or,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's that it's hard to say, and it varies. So, topically, for example, social emotional learning right now in picture books is very crowded. Biographies, very crowded because that's been a big focus for the last 5 years or so. So if I go out with a book on kindness and sharing right now, most editors are going to say we have these. We're looking for big, jazzy, commercial, funny, escapist. So it's passé, but you know what? In 5 years, editors, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have not bought anything in this. Middle grade is impossible to sell right now. And already editors are like, oh wow, we have zero middle grade on our list. You think? So I'm like, here, have some. So it's passé until it's not. It cycles around. And that's why writing to your passion is key. Because if you're chasing the market, what is selling right now that an author is just beginning to write, and then they're looking for an agent, and then the agent is looking for a publisher, and then the publisher is publishing it. By that time, that thing that is hot right now is probably going to be passé, but maybe the thing that's passé is going to be, you can drive yourself crazy. You
I'm
just
so
have,
I'm so
right?
glad you're saying this because I'm writing two biographies right now,
There you go. There you
and
go.
I and I
And
I know
the
I
market
know
will
I
just,
shouldn't, but I can't help it.
and that's what you should be writing. And by the
I,
time you're ready to have it in the world is going to be ready for it. I believe it. I
or
said it
not
and it's true.
or not. Before we go, I have to talk about you published these gorgeous children's books, and ghost books and growth and and then you have one book for adults, I quote, which is called Stories I Told My Dead Lover.
That's true.
Joan, I can't let you go without half a minute on that.
Without what?
Without half a minute on that
Oh,
book.
yes. Yeah, I mean that was it was
Nice child, growth, loving, mouths for
like
hugging and
one of these
kissing.
things is not like the other. Where's the Joan Venn diagram? It's like, oh, out there. Yeah, I mean, it just, what can I say? I guess it was sort of a tumultuous time in my life. I was just exploring new things and processing old things, and just kind of experimenting. And I really loved it. I loved, kind of writing, without the constraints of, having a young audience in mind, and just going in a different direction than I had before. And I really found that very satisfying and exciting. And I definitely want to keep doing more of that. And I did use a pen name, hence the Joe, because considering that the first book, My Hands Can, came out in June last year, or no, in May last year, and Stories I Told My Dead Lover came out in June. It's kind of, like yeah, not a lot of crossover is what I'm saying.
You don't want to tarnish the goody two shoes image here. Before we say goodbye, one more piece of advice for aspiring authors. We talked about passion.
Yes. I think just like it sounds obvious, but just keep reading because it's really important. I think that's how you get a sense of what feels current in terms of voice and energy and style, and and the more broadly you read, I think some people get very concerned about, like, oh, what if I accidentally copy, but the way to remedy that is to read more, because if you read one book in your year repeatedly, well, sure, maybe you're going to end up, but if you're just constantly consuming, number one, you're not going to accidentally repeat something, because you're going to be getting this sort of combination of input. And I just think a lot of learning to be a writer is consuming good writing. And I mean, I read a lot more for adults just for pleasure myself than I used to mostly read kid lit. But I'm trying to kind of keep that balance, kind of return to that balance more, because I'm like, I just want to read the fun stuff. But a great kids book is also fun, and B, it does just give you internal combustion. It builds that engine from the inside, without taking, not that you can't, but you don't even need to take writing classes, whatever you do. It's great that you do, but I think the best writing class is done just by processing writing and by internalizing without even being aware of it.
Joan, you have to go. We could just sit and talk for hours. I'm so delighted that you agreed for this interview. Um,
It was so
and
great.
uh,
I'm so glad that
and
you had me. It's very fun.
and I just we'll do it again. I mean, in 6 months, a year. When you like have a day and you say, "Oh, I don't want
Got
to go to
nothing
my
going on
coffee
today.
house. My slush pile is too high. I'm going to give
Caught
Mel a
up on
call.
all my queries, so
I'm
I
going to
got
give Mel a
nothing
call. And I'm going to say, gee, I don't know if I'm pretty busy these days. Uh,
on.
no, I'll stop what I'm doing. And so I just want to say that to all our listeners and to all our authors who want to send you stuff, well, right now you can't. Joan is not open for queries, but check her out where she's giving a talk, where she's presenting at a conference. And then sometimes you do open up like these petals that open up once every century. And I'm sure that you are a terrific agent to your flock of authors and illustrators. And Joan Paquette, Ammi-Joan Paquette, it's been wonderful having you on the show. And I am Mel Rosenberg, host of the Children's Literature Channel, the New Books Network. I've said that 200 times, I still forget. And thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thanks for having me. Delightful conversation.
Bye bye.
Bye.